right, everybody. Our apologies. We're having some struggles with our guest panelists, but I'd like to just open up the forum to just maybe have a conversation with the people that are here now. As previously mentioned, my name is Mushambi Mutuma. I'm an author and speaker based here in Johannesburg. And today's conversation was meant to be around the opportunities for connectivity and success on the continent. And I'm waiting for the event staff to kind of get our panelists, but I thought let's have an engaging conversation in the interim. Connectivity has really been a great opportunity for the continent to really leapfrog and jump where our technology and innovations are able to achieve. But we've got two sides of the spectrum, if you will. We've got part of the spectrum where we have situations where we've got areas in our continent where there's no running water or electricity, but there's the ability for people to stream, for people to watch movies and film music and do mobile payments. But we really stand at both ends of the spectrum from an innovation standpoint, but from an access and bandwidth and connectivity standpoint, especially when we look at rural communities versus urban communities, where we see that in urban communities, the smartphone usage connectivity is 200% higher than rural communities in some countries. So I'd love to have a conversation with those of you who are here. I've written a lot about the subject over the last year in my own book, Tech Adjacent, which really tells the story of what opportunities and what technology exists on the continent, and how there's some Wakanda-like technology that already exists now. But what I want to talk to you all today, and maybe for those of you who are in the chat, can give some context to maybe why you believe connectivity is actually so important, and how we can use it for kind of narrowing the digital and economic divide. So for those of you in the chat right now, maybe introduce yourself, and maybe let's answer this question: is why is connectivity so important as Africans? What is the opportunity that it presents ourselves? And Mr. Teniola, I know that you're not able to join in via voice and video right now, but maybe we can have the engagement via the chat bots. Just to give you some quick context, Mr. Teniola is a techie turned business leader. He's really done quite well in the markets in Nigeria as the CEO and president of ATCON. He's led Dimension Data in the past and several different ISP countries. And really on the regulatory and governmental side, from the Ministry of Communication side, he's really helped pave the way for where connectivity is going, and not only in Nigeria, but in West Africa, and is also the president of the Association of Telecom companies in Nigeria and the Affordable Internet Alliance in Nigeria and in London. So I'd love to see if we can get you here, at least in the chat, maybe to be able to answer some of our questions. But for some of our other listeners, if you will, it'd be great to kind of hear what's on your mind and answer the question of why connectivity is so important for our development. Yes, so I think I'll open the floor now and just give you a moment to contribute. Here we go. Okay, great. Connectivity is critical for meaningful internet access. Great. I see we're able to get you on one of the chats here. I hope I gave you a worthy introduction. So, sir, and I'll read out your answers as kind of you go, and I hope we can type fast. But kind of maybe in short, Mr. Teniola, is how do your respective businesses and interests contribute to kind of Africa's roadmap for success? You mentioned that connectivity is critical for meaningful internet access, but why do you think that's so crucial to us as Africans as a whole? I'll give you a moment there to answer, sir. So those of you just tuning in, we're going to continue this conversation via the chat and see if we can unpack this conversation as we deal with the technology, which sometimes fails us. He says he's able to answer any questions here on the chat, and thank you for the intro. I'll give him a few moments to chat his initial response to my questions as we continue today. Thank you, sir. I'm glad that as Africans, we've made a plan and figured out a way to still communicate. I think that speaks to our resilience as a people. So the first response is that connectivity is critical due to the digital transformation in progress. And that's spot on. Is that I think right now more than ever, the continent is going through a mass change. And so I'd love for you to kind of maybe unpack that. Is that particularly in Nigeria and in West Africa, what are the elements of digital transformation that you're really excited about, Mr. Teniola? Those that are leading the way have digital strategy in place and a national broadband plan. That's very true. That many of our countries are now getting on the wave from a governmental and a policy standpoint, and hoping to scale with the rise and scale of things like CCOM and the like. That's great feedback there, sir. You'll know that for those of you listening, we're just waiting for some of our typed responses here. We're on a little bit of a delay, but we'll continue on. And if you've got any questions for Mr. Teniola as he figures out the technical side while he answers in the chat, please feel free to ask, and we'll facilitate. He's just been giving us feedback to some of the things that in the Nigerian and West Africa space that he's most excited about, and the transformation that he's been able to see. Slight delay, guys, but I thank you all for tuning in, and I hope that you're enjoying Texposition and the content for the day. Great. Mr. Teniola, maybe the second question that I have for you is that, as mentioned, okay, here we go. I see your response now, sorry. Is that eGov initiative programs are moving away from legacy-based processes to a more efficient process that involves digitalization, and transformation in the way we work and play. I love that this is probably one of the biggest opportunities that connectivity allows for us, that our governments are going to be able to serve us much better, and in the process there, which is going to be even more improved. So I think that's a great answer. But I think maybe my question is, in environments where we struggle to get policy, where we struggle to get these national broadband plans and struggle to get these e-government initiatives, what do you believe is the very baseline that our governments need to do and start with if they haven't been able to maybe adapt to kind of where we are, particularly in Nigeria? I'll give you a moment there to answer. But again, to anybody else, if you got questions or comments here in our next 8 minutes or so, we appreciate your feedback and thus far. I love this answer as well, is that connectivity is essential for youth employment. This is very true. I think right now the continent has the world's youngest population in the world. The second thing that we do is that by 2030, we'll have the second largest workforce in the world, right behind Asia. So the African child is the consumer and as the employee of the future. So I think you're right. Connectivity now more than ever allows for employment opportunities than we were unable to see before. So thank you for that, sir. I know I've asked you a couple questions around what we need to do from a government standpoint and how we set this foundation. I'll give you a moment there to answer and for some of our other guests to comment. But thank you for figuring out a way to communicate with us, sir, and much appreciated. I'm just here scrolling to see if we've got any other questions or comments and respective polls. All right. We're just typing some answers here. We're on a little bit of a delay, but we figured out a nice way to communicate. Maybe the other question as you type, Mr. Teniola, is, if, as you answer where we get a foundation for where our governments need to go, if they don't have a national plan and e-governance in place, is that where are the new opportunities after we get the baseline? Is which pockets in Africa or even in Nigeria are people doing it really well? Are there pockets open for investment and for us for scale? Maybe you can give that some thought as you answer. And while you answer that, I think one of the things that I'll go back to is the value, I think, of connectivity. Mr. Teniola mentioned on the educational standpoint. I think connectivity also extends from a medical standpoint. Is from a smart devices, from a remote diagnostics element. I think across the continent, we've got a major shortage of healthcare workers. And what connectivity allows for is now we get to have reach with four-ways and telemedicine and the like. Okay, we got an answer here. Is he says that governments need to take engagement with all stakeholders in a PPP model. Yes, that's spot on to address the obstacles to implementation. So I think that there needs to be private-public partnership. For those of you who don't know what PPP means, is that government needs to open up who it works with and partners with, and the more stakeholders to kind of further to your point, Mr. Teniola, thank you, is that we get more stakeholders involved, and then we're able to have a better team to work together. And I think the examples on the continent where we've done the best, even in environments like Rwanda, is when government has brought in the public to do best and not always try to take that on. And I think those opportunities for partnership are great. Thank you so much for that response. The other question I asked as we wait for your responses and other people to also contribute is, and we'll also look at the Twitter account and see if we can find any content there. So thank you there, Sharif, is much appreciated for reminding us the respective hashtags for the day. But if you got any other comments as we go, please through. So the places that Mr. Teniola is super excited about, where he sees opportunity and potential for investment, are digital financial services. I think the banking sector is shifting. The mobile wallet system is shifting tremendously. Local content, that's very spot on, is that we're now seeing major companies like Netflix invest and take time into this sector, and then building platforms across the ecosystem that drives towards 4IR, which is of course the biggest buzzword of 2020 after Corona and COVID, is the fourth industrial revolution. But the great thing that I'm excited about is I think this positions the continent in a great way to kind of have this silver bullet for growth, the silver bullet for development. So thank you for that, Mr. Teniola. We just got a few minutes left, but one of the other questions I want to ask you is that if you had $1 million today, given these opportunities that you've mentioned, where would you put it, and perhaps why? What is the biggest opportunity that 4IR holds for the next 5 to 10 years? He says he's tremendously excited about Paystack, Nollywood, music opportunities, and monetizing the IPR. Paystack has done tremendously well, as I'm sure most of you have heard. In the last few years, is that Stripe, a Silicon Valley-based leader in the payment space, acquired Nigeria's Paystack for, I believe, $220 million, which is a huge investment anywhere in the world, but I think it's primarily exciting for our continent. And I wish we all had the ability to invest in those young men a few years ago to get this $200 million payday. But I think it also presents, to maybe echo your sentiment, Mr. Teniola, is it echoes it presents the opportunity that African organizations and African business models have tremendous scalability and revenue ability. $200 million is not a small piece of change anywhere in the world. So I think it speaks to the massive opportunity that the rest of the globe is seeing. We've seen Jack Dorsey investing heavily into Africa. We've seen Jack from Alibaba, coming into the country as well. And he says, where would you put $1 million? $1 million US would be in AI, ML, and big data, machine learning. From an ML standpoint, a massive one for Africa is where data is unreliable at the moment. You're so right there, sir. Is that and AI, automation, machine learning, and big data, it's completely untapped. So for those of you who are young people interested in where to get into the space, if we've got one of the industry leaders and one of, I'd say, the main leaders of broadband and connectivity in Nigeria and West Africa, saying that's where he'd put his money, and that's probably where you need to be investing your education and your insights and into your data. We just got about 2 minutes left. And I've just got a key question here. One of my favorite quotes, sir, is that brands that evolve the present, so people that evolve the present, are involved in the future. So if you evolve where we are today, you won't ever get disrupted. You won't ever get replaced because you'll position and future-proof yourself. What do our guests today need to evolve in order to be involved in the future of this continent? Kind of in closing, what would you say is the biggest thing that we need to do? Um, I see. You mentioned that the threat of OTT on the local representation is real. It's so true. Is that there's a massive need for us to get into this space before everybody else along the globe has done so. So I think we need to own these territories, and I agree with you there. Hopefully, we can get your last comment here on what we need to evolve today to be in the future as we close out. Using the broadband pipes for building African brands, yes. We need to have our own Netflix, our own Facebook, our own YouTube. We need to tell our own stories. That's so spot on, sir. We've just got about 30 seconds here. So while I wait for your last comment, I would like to thank Mr. Teniolo for using the technology that we had available today to keep this conversation going. And to the viewers who stuck out this entire period, thank you as well for kind of contributing to this conversation and listening in and making it work. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of Texposition. Mr. Teniola, I look forward to connecting you offline. STEM,